Hello, Gus and Gumas here, and I am back with another linguistics video. This video was created in order to demonstrate my knowledge and understanding from material presented to me in assignment number 2. I will keep this one simple and gradually answer prompt 1, 2, and 3 in that very order. Now that my agenda for today's video has been laid out, let's begin. Lippy Green introduces the idea of the sound house. For prompt 1, I have been asked to give my own explanation. So here we go. The sound house is the term for the way people learn how to use the human language. This is how we learn and develop how to speak. In Lippy Green's terms, the home of language. Now, this starts from birth. Naturally, kids get to pick and choose what and how they speak based upon the materials of their surroundings. What I mean is the pronunciation of vowels and consonants, the length, the tone, and the harmony of the speech is all gathered from one's inner family. What establishes the building blocks of the child's foundation shall sound the same too. This is how a sound house is built. Sound houses, in a way, feed off other sound houses. So in basic terms, what I'm trying to say is how your parents talk, the tone, the rhythm, how quickly, how they pronounce things, how they end and start their words, sentence structure, everything they do collected together. This is how a child will grow up and talk. These are the blueprints and the ways of how we speak. Learning language became more complex after your sound house begins to fill up. When remixing your sound house with its own language, one will begin to confuse their own sound house, and learning other languages begins to become a lot more difficult. Now, I have not one, but 2 explanations to help clarify this. One of them comes from this journal article I found about the adaptations of novel foreign languages through accents and speech. And what they found is through hearing different kinds of accents, one can adapt a new form of speech, and it is possible through prior exposure of talkers of the same accent. And this was done and recorded by a Bieber Rien, who is hearing, sound, and speech scientist at the University of Maryland. With that being said, reading this journal article, I found it helpful, but it didn't quite hit home for my personal vendetta of picking up what we are learning. So I had to search a little bit further, and for me, I found this poem written by Lippy Green herself. More of a story, but it's put in a way where I could read and fictionalize her story and then transform it into this lesson. So I will read you her story, and it goes like this. With her bare hands, she gets out to build an extension to her original sound house. She sees bricks she doesn't have in her own inventory, but how to get back to the warehouse? She'll have to improvise. The obvious things she sees right off. Wow, they have fireplaces. The less obvious things. The width of doors, for example, slipped right by her at first. How did you build that chimney, she asked. I don't know, says her informant, a native speaker of Spanish. I was a kid at the time, and I have lost my blueprints. Through this story, it helped me figure out how one is able to gain and lose their way of speaking. And It's just like how people learn how to forget all day activities just through not repetition, through losing the constantness. Um, so with that, this tends to happen at the age of 6 to 10. For me, this tells everyone that I have a northern drawl, but I also have some southern terms. Um, what I mean is I hang my A's in a lot of, not a lot, but some of my words, sometimes changing my O's to A's even. For instance, people here in Kentucky tell me um, that stop is spelled with an O, not an A. I get teased on for saying stop, all the time. But at the same time, my friends from back home, they don't understand what I say half the time because my terms come from here, Kentucky, because that is where my family grew up at. So I have a northern sound house, but terminology from the south. It is how you'd probably describe an American blend. A blend within a blend. Being a mixed blend like myself, I'd say it makes it easier to be acceptable to acquire other native like influences additional to my own dialect. Um, so this right here, I would say I am a decent code switcher, but I'm more self-aware. And this is because I'm aware some people don't understand me. So I am also aware that some people don't understand people properly. So sometimes it takes a little extra thought to catch someone's drift. Now, being well after the age of confusion, I think my code switching is decent. Like I said, not the best. I'm more self-aware. I don't initially always hear what is being said or how it is pronounced, but I do put in a little extra thought into listening how it comes out. In addition to that statement, I believe that it is true based on my experience working in an Indian culture with Indian store owners. At first, I couldn't always understand what my bosses were trying to say, but I got better in due time through listening more in hopes of understanding their brittle English. At the same time, they began announcing less as I began to pick it up quicker. Sharish, I guess, would always just try to keep me on my toes. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this first section by saying why people would think my sound house from their sound house differs. And I'd like to just reiterate what I said earlier. The drawl on my A's and the changing of my O's to A's would probably be the kicker in how I sound different. Or for a better term, how I sound like I'm from Northern Ohio. Alright, so now that prompt 1 has been explained and answered, I will now dive into prompt 2. Being gifted with a different kind of section, I laid it out a little bit differently. I will individually count 1 to 10, labeling each question at the beginning of my statement for its purpose. Now let's begin. Number 1. What is SAE? Well, SAE is an acronym in this class that stands for Standard American English, and it is the standard speech for American English. What I mean by standard is that this is the bar. This is how we talk, even though all over our region it gets, I would say, bent. Not broken, but smushed, rearranged, disinformed. It changes. So for foreigners, this would be the standard if you are trying to blend in with our culture. It is how we find the standard use of our mixed up, complicated English language. Number 2, why does the asterisk appear before it? And to answer that, the asterisk appears before it because it is not normal. SAE. It is not the normal SAE term. It stands for the Standard American English instead of other SAE acronyms, so it just makes it stand out a little bit more so we understand what we're talking about. Number 3, who speaks it? In a sense, anyone who speaks an educated form of English dialect. The standard is taken from what is taught in school, so educated people tend to speak SAE. If you want to get technical, it would be mostly Midwesterns and on-air jobs like newscasters and weather broadcasters. And that all comes from history. Number 4, do you think you speak it? Well, if my last statement is true, I would say yes. I do believe I speak the educated form of the American English dialect. And I am saying that because I, like I mentioned before, grew up in Midwest, more specifically Northern Ohio, and to be exact, Columbus, Ohio is where you would pinpoint my growth. So yeah, I do believe I speak the standard American English. Number 5, considered standard language ideology, SLI. Where did this idea come from? Well, if we're talking about SLI, this idea is solely in place to reinforce SAE. And that's being said because if you have multiple things coming at you proving one theory, so to say, it gives it more power and reinforcement on being true. So SAE has more strength and power of being true, making SAE the more powerful statement. Who is served, number 6, who is served poorly and who is served well by SAE and SLI. And if we're going to jumble these last 3 questions together, 3, 4, and 5 would answer number 6, or at least the statements I provided inside of those would. People in the South are misled in the media, through the media, by these terms, making them out of the standard, making how they talk not right, making them seem illiterate, making people think that they're stupid. But these last statements are misconceptions. However, they are very true here in America through media broadcast. It's just been pounded and beaten into our heads over and over. And I got that from my COM 249 class and COM 449. Professor Doug Boyd. Through his class, he showed us what media can do and how powerful it is. Multiple research aspects within that class got me to understand and learn that what the media tells you is what you'll think, or at least what you'll think about. And that comes from the agenda setting theory that we pretty much dissected in both of those classes. Like I said, Doug Boyd, COM, professor here at the University of Kentucky. And this can all stem from my belief from the South trying to succeed from the North. And if you ask me, history seems to be punishing the future. Now with this statement, I will bring up another outside source that agrees with most outside sources, saying my last statement is false. Studies have shown whether you are from the North or South, a Southern twang pegs the speaker as comparatively dim-witted, but also likely to be a nicer person. Now, these are all stereotypical conceptions that we do believe are true. But history did not make these true, like I had stated earlier. This is from The This is from a Scientific American website, blogged and backed up as being very credential. And the statement is given by an R. Douglas and was released of December 7th, 2012. And R. Douglas and many other anthropologists have agreed on this notion I am about to explain right now, that I got, like I said, from the Scientific American website. And it's not to do with the war, it has to do with dividing. Even on tiny islands they found in countries like the United Kingdom, accents bound and are highly pigeonholed individuals into strict social strata that have presented itself for centuries. It's just a division on who's right and who's wrong. So I wonder about this when I was swept by Adele, they said, and even though what she was saying, people were following after they heard her speak in a different accent from a standard. They are, she is being washed out. Moving on from that, we will go back to answering these questions. Number 7, what are the institutional implications of SLI? Like I said before, and I'll just reiterate, I guess again, for number 7, the implications of taking or talking different are like the implications of stereotypes drawn with them. You beg people to judge even though you don't deserve it. Judging and filing and categorizing is just natural. It's what we do. And the standard or SLI just makes it more easily available for people to see and pick out. Number 8. When trying to imagine attending UK, what would it be like for other languages at all? How would classes like WRD be different? So if we were to travel over to England, it'd be extremely hard. I would miss a lot of things they would be talking about. I would not fully understand what is being told. Classes and languages would be different, and I would pick up a great deal of the English dialect, but like we mentioned earlier, when confusing a soundhouse, I would also be throwing in my SAE dialect. So yeah, I would prosper there in due time, but then I would suffer when I came back here to the States. So yeah, it would be very hard, and I don't think it would be worth it, honestly. Number 9, imagine, if you don't already, that you speak a variety of English that differs markedly from SAE. How would you go about writing it down if asked to do so? That'd be challenging, just because writing down and hearing something is completely different. Writing it down puts in more thought and more categorizing, which leads to judgment later. Writing down all the different ways to ask for a caffeinated drink, so to say, from all the different regions and how they pronounce it, the different words, that would be challenging. I think I can think of 3 different ways to say you all right now. You all, for one, you guys, and the Kentucky Standard, y'all. So if I had to, because I was out of the SAE, since I've said it before, I'll just say it again. It's natural to categorize and label, so I would categorize and label the differences in between the certainty of words, and how you go about that. Um, you would just put them in files and just label them. So yeah, categorizing yet again. And to wrap up section number 2, number 10. What about this idea makes you realize the correlation between literacy and SAE? That they go hand in hand, but literacy is the standard in terms of the standard of being taught in school, making literacy the educated form. Just because I say they go hand in hand doesn't mean you're illiterate just because you speak a different form of SAE. Like I said, they're just labels and definitions on how we explain things. To be literate, you would speak in the SAE form. So literacy and SAE go hand in hand. Literacy and intelligence, however, are two different terms. So to say you're illiterate and to say you're intelligent, unintelligent, would, like I said, be two different forms. So I don't think if you are illiterate, you're stupid. You are just away from the standard. And that is all I have on prompt number 2. Closing out, we will now talk about prompt number 3. And prompt number 3 is considering the R. It sounds so proper and snobby to talk about, but at the same time, it makes sense. So finally, let's indeed consider the R. Drawing from the presentation of Laborov's fourth floor research and our discussion in class, I will now present the complete situation of the post-vocalic R-full and R-less in American English and American English history. Drawing the R and adding the R was a sign of who is intelligent and who is not intelligent. And a little history lesson needs to be put in place to explain this intently, so I will do so. And it all stems back from America's early foundation and how we wanted to get set up, so to say. Excuse me. That being said, we wanted to succeed from Britain when we succeed from Britain. And what I mean by that is in all terms. We didn't want to be British at all. We wanted to be original. We wanted to be American. And that included the way of how Britons talk compared to how we should talk. And this goes back to regional varieties. And that all stems from migration back in when America first started getting settled up. So different people landed in different parts of America. So North America was held from where people in Great Britain, southeastern New England, settled. So they spoke the proper British English. Coastal and southeastern, or I guess at this time, since we're in the 1700s, South America spoke different English. So they varied. And when we were trying to succeed from Britain, we were trying to succeed from everything Britain. So we don't want to be like the New Englanders. We want to be more like the South Americans of North America. So the standard will change as we forced it to change. Areas such as Western Pennsylvania and upstate New York both occurred before vowels like coastal South and in the coastal North. Up until the 1930s, the coastal North was the New England. So, like I said, they spoke of the British standard. Dialect was generally seen to be not like what we needed in the United States. So a bunch of smart people started getting together and said, we need to drop the R at the end of our words because that is how English sounds. And we don't want to be like that. We want to be like American. Um, so this all started occurring after the 1920s, Depression, World War II. Everything started to shift in our world. So features started to switch places. The South became to talk more like the North. Um, Factors of the R, people wanted to be more like the 99% instead of the 1%. So the common people instead of the upper class. But this really hit hard when Noah Webster um, decided what was going to be what. He wasn't about the British English, so to say. He was about succeeding. So, where did he come from? Midwest. Where from? Ohio. So, people from Ohio set the standard. People from Ohio dropped the R. And that happened through what else again? Media. The printing of the Noah Webster Dictionary. The Webster Dictionary pretty much set the standard. And how did it spread? Spread like everything spreads. Immigration, migration. People started moving around, taking their customs with them. When people branched out from the Midwest and went into coastal New England, things started to change. Stereotypes started to change. People started to hate other people for the way they talked. Yeah, hate's the word I want to use. So, with such a strong emotion, things started to change. And that pretty much started happening in between 1890 and 1930. The Great Migration not only migrated people, but it migrated cultures and the dropping of the R. Anti-Southern sentiment following Civil War just gave further reason. So that's why the big change was in 1890. But answering this question a little further, Webster's 1934 edition of the dictionary was the big booster. After that, like I said, the rich white men, CEOs of these corporations started putting this dialect into the way people heard things over the radio, which made it more constant and more similar to the way people should talk, which started making changes. Yeah, this was all socially. This is all because a group of people wanted to be right, so they started pointing fingers at people, making other people wrong. It's all for power. It's not because people want to. How do I want to say this? It's all for power. People want to be right. People don't want other people's people being ahead of them. All goes back to race. So that is my complete explanation of the situation of the post vocalic R full and R list. Present day, it's kind of hard for me to answer that question just because I do speak of the SAE dialect. I do speak the standard, but personally, I don't use it for social factors. I don't hear people talk different and judge them intellectually. I judge them on their respect for others and the correctness of the words coming out of their mouth. Even if you talk like a little bit of hillbilly, a little bit of hillbilly could be right too. Doesn't mean because the way he sounds he's wrong. It's the words he uses that I judge mostly. Um, so yeah, for me it's not power, but for the history of America, it was indeed for power. Um, that being said, I really believe I've answered the questions thoroughly through and through. So I will be wrapping up this video and saluting you into the weekend. Thank you, and have a good day.